Hey guys, and welcome back to Digital Artcast. Another episode coming at you. Again, with what's going on in the world right now, I hope all you guys again are staying safe. I know I kind of reiterate this every podcast, but I do want to make sure that you all are living your best lives and looking after yourselves in these troubling times. I'm hoping that these episodes are bringing a little bit of joy into your life, or making it a little bit easier to bear with what's going on. For some reason this year, the last 6 months has been a real time of heavy hitters coming on the podcast. Like I said, we've had people on lists trying to get on the podcast for a while, trying to have specific people, but today I was lucky again to speak to an artist that I have personally loved his work for a long time and wanted him on. And finally, with time differences aside, thank God, he's been able to come on and give up some of his time to talk about his process, his art, and his experiences with the industry, and of course what he's doing currently. So will you please welcome me and welcoming our today's guest, Mr. Jan Urschel. Hey Jan.
Oh, hello. Good to be here.
Yes, indeed. Which is a bit weird, I think, with our time differences, because I'm currently in Scotland and you're in
Singapore. Yeah.
Singapore, yeah. So that's a big time difference, across the world for us. But
okay. Not as bad as America and Asia.
Oh yeah, that would be. Oh god, yeah. LA especially. I think the last time I flew out in September, it was the first 3 days was just getting over the jet lag because you're such a difference. But yeah, it's good to be weird. But yeah, thank you for coming on. I do appreciate you giving up your time. I know you're busy just now, so as always most artists of your caliber will be during these times. But how have you found with COVID and with the shut-in, have you been drastically affected by it at all, work-wise? Or
actually not at all.
Right,
it's weird because the world around you kind of crumbles, and then the whole Black Lives Matter also got in swing, and you feel like what's going on. But for myself, it's like nothing really changed. But that's probably because I'm a freelancer and I work from home anyway, and have for the last God knows how many years. And so I notice people like friends, colleagues, like studios shut down, get laid off or whatever, don't have work, and they have to change their whole life. And I'm like,
been preparing for this stuff for a long time.
Business as usual. So.
Yeah. I always laughed at the meme that was on Facebook for years talking about gamers from like the 90s who were like, I've been prepping for this day all my life. I knew it was coming, the shut-in. Yeah. So.
But strangely enough, while also the movie industry seemed to have shut down tremendously, I didn't notice any I didn't notice how do I say, like, any break in like work or anything. Like suddenly, actually, I feel like I have more work now than I had before.
Okay.
So I really don't know what happened there. So yeah, I've been busy and planning lots of things, and
you've been super active doing your tutorials as well, right? That's been a big thing you've been pushing the last couple of months as well. So
I've been actually pushing that since early last year.
Right.
So it was just a coincidence, I guess. I felt like I was because I always tried to do a new one every month, even though I was quite busy with client work and everything. And I think it was a lucky move. I think that I pushed through that. But what I feel like a lot of people have time now for contemplation and reflection and kind of rethink what they want to do and do a lot of personal work. Whereas I'm full steam ahead with client stuff and all the other stuff I have. And I'm like, I want some of that break time, to be honest, to just look back at what I did and what I want to do. And, I didn't have that chance yet, so I know it's a bit weird because a lot of people are forced to take this time off, right? And I am out of necessity, and for me, it's like I would love to have that, whereas they probably want to have the busy schedule that I currently have. So it's a bit, the grass is always greener on the other side, kind of thing.
Yeah. So. Yeah, but then you've watered your grass for a long time, Jan, so that's why it's greener. So I mean, so but then yeah, of course. But then it is the freelance life where you want to have a break, but then you always have this gut feeling like if you say no to a project, you're going to have this span of like 2 months without work, and then you're going to panic. And so
that's always
at the back of your mind. So I can understand why you're always trying to take on a lot of work and be busy. So
it's terrible, but it never gets any better though. I mean, it's not like it's not like you're like established or like well known and you worked on a lot of great stuff. That does not count for anything anymore.
Right. Oh, it's interesting. Why would you say that?
I mean, I've talked to a lot of people and even people who have been in the industry for a lot longer than I've been. And it seems to be the general consensus. I mean, among people that stay freelancers, that stay concept artists, right? That it doesn't get any easier. It maybe even gets more difficult. Like even if you've been a big shot in Hollywood like 10 years ago, it doesn't guarantee that you're going to have work tomorrow at all.
Because of course the industry moves. The
industry moves. Like you have all these young kids competing against you, and they can pull all-nighters all week long, whereas you're getting tired at 10 p.m. And you have other priorities in life, right?
Family and stuff. So
that's hard. And also, the learning of new tools, right? Like it accelerates faster and faster with all the new stuff going on. A lot of people are just being left behind because it's just difficult to be on top of all this stuff, right? A lot of people, like a lot of older ones, are like coming now, like, oh, should I learn 3D? Like, what is this Blender stuff, right? So, and I know it's tough, right? And I mean, that's why I guess you find a lot of people beyond 40 in art direction roles or in different roles overall, and not staying freelancers, and especially like concept artists, right? So because it just becomes very, very difficult at some point.
I think I was watching a Chris Do broadcast the other day, the Future podcast. They were doing a kind of live demo thing, and Chris was talking about, there was a quote from, I can't remember who it was specifically, but it was a person who was saying that the illiterate people of the 21st century won't be people who can't read and write. It will be the people who can learn, unlearn, and adapt. So what he was basically saying is that, a lot of people still put merit in, or if you can read or write, but what will define you in this century is being able to learn new skills and change rapidly and keep up with the way things move. So I think we're definitely seeing that, especially in our industry, like it is ever present. And I think there's always there's a pull and push from the industry, because as many people like yourself who do AAA high quality work on films and games, there are people I know who like don't use any 3D at all. Like their bread and butter is drawn. They draw pen and paper, ink, have for many years, still have a lot of work. So I think if you want to play at like the level you're at, where you're working on Star Wars, you're working on these big projects, games, that skill set definitely is one that will change rapidly. But then there's obviously the other side of it, where you could still use those traditional skills if you wanted to. I think it just depends what level you want to play it, right? But So, I mean, you've done, everything at this point. What have you worked on? But then, is that been something that you feel, with the introduction of Blender into your pipeline, is that just something that you feel has exponentially sped up your process, your pipeline, or is it are you finding new ways to be an artist with that technology now?
You mean with Blender specifically, or in general?
I mean, I suppose you've probably always used 3D in a sense, right? But then with Blender now being so readily available and so powerful for free for what it is that something that you just used it more and more, I suppose? I'm not saying that you're using it as a replacement for painting, but do you feel like it's something that, are you painting less now? Do you feel like you're creatively using those skills less? And
I don't paint at all.
Right. So it's almost just entirely, it's all 3D, like 100%. Yeah. I mean, do you? On you go.
Go ahead. No, it's okay. Yeah, let me jump in there. I think it's just. I mean, I've like how you connect the dots looking back,
right.
But while you're in it, you don't really realize what you're doing. But then you look back and you realize, and you suddenly come to the conclusion that everything you've been doing anyway has led you to this point, and all the choices I've made. So, I mean, because of all the questions I get, with making tutorials comes, of course, a lot of people who look to you for technical help as well. So that made me kind of analyze and look back at what I've used over the years and how did I get to this point. So, I mean, like you said, I started 3D a long time ago. Even back, I took like elective course at a university in 3D Studio Max, and that was terrible, like 15 years ago. I don't know if 3D Studio Max has significantly evolved since then, but
I don't think so.
I've never touched it again. And then I kind of lost it a bit, and I got back to it in when I had to use Maya in the pipeline in Lucasfilm, because that's what they're based on. And so I learned Maya there on the job, and I don't know, Maya is Maya, whatever. But it felt like the clunky kind of 3D you remember, like the whole just like polygons pushing and click, and then you wait for your render, and it kind of looks like shit, and then you try to adjust it, and it looks even worse. So that's kind of what initially just pushed me away a little bit from 3D, right? Because you have your painting, which is the very immediate kind of feel of creating something. But with back in the day with 3D, it was like, pushing and technical things and pulling vertices and like, what is this shit, right? But then I tried again when Modo was like quite popular with concept artists, like in 2011, 2012, I think. So I jumped into that and used it a fair bit, but only always to that stage where you have like a block out and then you just paint on top. I never took it really, really very far. And, but over the years, it kind of snuck its way more and more into my work, I think, at least for like at least for like assets, for vehicles, for that kind of stuff. I tended to use a lot of 3D, and for landscape, I kind of like put it away. Even though landscapes is like an environments, architecture is kind of most of what I do, and I think it took me a couple of years until I think like 2015 or so when I really like forced myself more to use it. It wasn't kind of like it's weird in a way. It wasn't like that natural, but I felt like the way my brain works, I was never really happy with painting, I think. I didn't think I was any like really any good in it, and I felt like the way you can design and lay out your stuff and think about the functionality in 3D is a lot more of how I'd like to work. So that really accelerated, I think, me using 3D a lot more. And then I think around the time, like I was doing a lot of ships for Star Citizen, then I really forced myself to, I want to see if I can just deliver something final in 3D with very, very little Photoshop. And that worked surprisingly well. It took me a really long time to build one of these things, but it worked. And but at some point I got really fed up with Modo, because it kind of went the way of Autodesk, I feel, a little bit, because the feature set didn't really expand much, and I was still paying a lot of money to buy the licenses. And then a friend turned me on to Blender, and I was like, I don't know, it looks a bit weird. And that was still the 2.79 days, and then it was around the time that 2.8 came around that I was like, okay, this looks pretty interesting and it's free. Let me give it a shot. And I think the real-time aspect of building something was really intriguing, because then you can remove one of the barriers of, okay, this is like a gray box and looks like shit, and then, okay, I'll render it later, and I kind of use my imagination to see how it looks like later. Which kind of removes a bit of the immediateness of wanting to express yourself. with your designs. But now that you could remove that by just like turning all the nice materials and lights and whatnot in real time, and could just continue working in that environment, is something really that really helped somebody who was like like a very visual person, like all of us artists are, right? And then I've never got really into sculpting or any of the other stuff. It was always, I think it's just by the nature of what I'd like to work on, right? The architectural stuff, the environment. So I wasn't like a character or monster guy, or I was never like that. So it was much, I feel like overall, looking at it overall, it was not like that any particular, I think, app or anything was suddenly like giving me like this eureka moment or anything. I think it was a very, very, very slow progression over many years that kind of led me to this point. And I mean, I tried many different weird things and see if I can do something with it. I tried Houdini and all this kind of stuff, and yeah, it's interesting, but maybe not kind of aligned with what I want to learn. Because I mean, look at that stuff these days. There's so much stuff out there, and you want to learn everything, and you really have to pick and choose to see how you can really effectively learn something well enough to be able to use it in your work.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think I do feel your pain, and so do many other people, when you look at, guys who are, maybe 2D artists traditionally, or they have got some traditional skills, and then they're also learning 3D, and then can use ZBrush or Maya, as well as people who have that as a full-time job, right? There's people I know at ILM, Pablo Dominguez, for example. Shout out Pablo. Pablo at the moment is just burning up the night oil, learning everything he can, and building stuff in ZBrush and 3D, even 3D coat and stuff. And but he can also paint, excessively well. So he's almost just like hitting every cylinder at full speed. But for me, like, sometimes I'm always struggling to think about, well, it's great I can do this, but then I've also got to think about the 5 other programs I'm still needing to learn to get anywhere near. It's a very big undertaking. I think I had this conversation with an artist, how he talked about the industry at the moment is extremely competitive, and there is a whole high ceiling to hit before you get anywhere near a studio. But he does feel, on the flip side, those tools make it easier in some respects to get your work seen, because like, and for instance, with your latest Blender tutorials, stuff like with cinematic design, somebody could play around enough in Blender with assets for Megascan and make something appealing. Know that they might know 100% what they're doing, but focus back to maybe 10 years ago, when you would have to render all that by hand or use photobashing to a large extent. Do you feel like 3D is dropping the barrier slightly for people to work in this industry, or?
I mean, you, maybe in a way it's easier to put out polished work,
right?
That for sure. But I mean, honestly, in the end, it still comes down to what are you trying to say with this image? What are you trying to establish? What are you trying to show, right? If you just purely put some Megascan stuff together and then you leave it at that without any further development, then it's just then it comes down to like, how well can you render it out? How real is it gonna look?
Right.
It depends really on what the focus is, because I mean, people in studios, they're not stupid, right? They have been art directors and teams. They have been using Megascans for ages. They know exactly what's on there. So if you give them nothing but like pre-made assets from some store and plug them together, then I mean, if you want to be an environment artist, then that's totally fine. If you want to build virtual sets or whatever, then great. But that will not get you hired as a concept artist.
Right. Yeah, I know what you mean. Like, there's only so far you can push that stuff, or so many assets you can use before it just looks like an almost rinse and repeat of the same stuff over and over again.
Maybe, but then I mean, think about it, right? If all you can do is assemble these scenes, then and you want to be a concept designer, like you're gonna fail at your first task in the studio if you do get hired. and they tell you like, can you design something, and it's going to look crap and it doesn't look anything like the rest of what is in your portfolio, then you're going to find yourself on the street after a few days.
Yeah, because the Megascan library has great assets, but then only so many. You can't have an individual asset for every single brief that you're going to get as a concept designer. You will have to eventually know how to model stuff. Well, if you're going to use 3D specifically in your pipeline,
not even from a technical side, but you need to like, they know if you can't design anything, if you don't know how to combine shapes and materials and build stuff from scratch, right? Because that's what you're going to be required to do, right?
Yeah. So what was the stuff you're doing recently with Blender, especially like even like looking at the vending machine stuff, are these just which I thought were great. I mean, I think it was one of the first comments on your YouTube saying yes, they are extremely funky. But what was the, is that just, are you constantly just throwing experiments into like how far you can push environments or find a new way to create assets? Is that just like a constant challenge you're bouncing off of?
So, I mean, when I started out doing all these tutorials, of course, the first things I pull from are experience, right? So what have I already been using? And that takes some time to go through, right? And of course, there's going to be a slight amount of repetition, but I try as much as possible to do a different angle of what is important and what you need to focus on, right? Sometimes it's lighting, sometimes it's architectural stuff, sometimes it's something completely different. And but of course, at some point you're going to run out of stuff you have done before, and then you need to push forward and dig a little deeper. And then usually for me, it ends up being a combination of stuff I recently learned, stuff I saw and experimented with, and then trying to combine that with what I know, with what with my experience, with just the general kind of like, I always try to imagine, okay, this looks cool, and somebody like it. I mean, sometimes I look at like popular stuff online, right? It's like, oh, this like why is this popular? Like, is there something behind that is actually useful, right? So I try to see how that can be used in production, and I always try to find the angle of like, because my angle is that I'm a production guy. I work with clients all the time. So how can this technique that I learned fit into that pipeline? How can it be useful to me and to others? And usually out of that is a new tutorial is born. And I mean, I don't use these techniques like exclusively all the time, like only one of them. Like, I use all of them together, right? Little bits and pieces, and depending on the job, sometimes one of these techniques will be more applicable than the other. So, and that's what I hopefully always try to communicate to people, that it's not very effective if you just like do exactly what I did and that's all you ever do. Like, you need to figure out like how can this fit into my style, into my pipeline? What can I combine it with, right? Like, because you need to combine the procedural stuff with the photo texturing stuff, and if you combine all of these together, then you're unstoppable, right? And I hope that's what people get out of it, right? But so that's kind of my thoughts always behind that stuff. I mean, because you have so many tutorials out there and for Blender, right? And they're great in their own right, like, but a lot of it, by the nature of like who the people in the community of Blender are, which is quite a large amount, I think, of like hobbyists, enthusiasts, you don't always have like a large amount of people like for Modo or Maya. Most of them are like professionals who use that, right?
I was going to say, like, especially when it comes to Blender, I think probably you and Yama are like two of the most defined people who are using it within careers, within the actual industry. But then a lot of the stuff I have seen for Blender outside of that is, like you said, it's more hobbyists. It's people who have used
there are
it.
plenty, actually. There are actually quite a few people like Florent Lebrun. He has been using it for a long time, and others.
Florent, yeah.
And they, but they, I won't say they have been very vocal about it, but I think it was just a different time, and they have been using it, and they probably know way more than I do about this stuff and what it can do, right? But I guess they have not, or they are not as interested in doing tutorials and that kind of stuff, and nobody has to be, right? It's not like they try to hide that knowledge or anything, but I mean, there's a difference in just a difference in approach. But I mean, there's, I think, quite a few people who have been using it for a while, but I think it comes all down to that 2.8 release and just a weird coincidence in time and cosmic rays, I don't know, that just make these things like blow up so much. I mean, I have my own reasons why I like it. I don't know if these necessarily align with other people's, but so, I mean, for me, I think one of the main things is that, I mean, I don't even want to talk about the price. I mean, yeah, Blender is free, but I've spent so much money on plugins. I'm like, why do I keep saying Blender is for free if I spend so much money on plugins, right?
Yeah, but then that's when the power really lies in Blender, right? Is the ability to just plug in things that will just make your stuff you're learning or your final renders exponentially better. So, I mean,
it's always like I'm not completely happy with that, to be honest, because again, I think it's a bit of the legacy of Blender that they only recently released like a version of Blender that actually will receive long-term support from the company, so that it can actually be used in pipelines and whatnot. But I mean, it was stagnant for quite a while, and then now they're pushing out so many updates with all the money they have received in the fund, and the new partners and sponsors. So like things are moving very fast, and it feels like the plugin developers, they can't even catch up. There's now so many different versions out there that they need to support, which makes it difficult for production people to use it as a reliable workhorse. Because oh, can I really like this feature, but I can't upgrade because the plugin is going to break, and which creates a bit of a problem. But
no, I was going to say, I mean, I think it's interesting where you think you've got a feeling down, because I mean, like for me, when I started using Maya back in the day, I mean, I can still open Maya now, and I'm very familiar with it. I know which buttons do which. There's not enough change that I feel like I need to relearn it every time it comes out every year. But then with Blender, from like you say, from 2.8 to 2.9, now you're looking at new tools that have just come into the program, and you're like, oh great, this is something else to play with. Because when I was going through your tutorial, you were talking about the shadow mode that the kind of that you can be using for black and white sketching, which I thought was incredible. I was always looking for something like that within Maya, but then it'll be, like 2.9 just landed. There's also this thing you posted the other day. There's a new sky system in it that's just came out. So it's almost like, you feel like you've always hit the edge of the software, but then the goalpost or the edge of the world keeps moving.
Non-stop, right?
Yeah. But then, I mean, it's technology in a sense where, like, even where Yama at one point was using a lot of VR in his work, these things that come out are always going to play on your foundational skills. So composition, lighting, are always going to be important. But then, the next Blender might be something else, and then everybody will move, but then those skills will stay the same, right? You'll still be using your base understanding of the software.
And that's what a lot of people don't seem to get, right? They're like, oh, I'm using, like, it's. I mean, Jama can make something look good with, like, I don't know, he can fold a napkin and it's going to look great, right? So because he has the foundational skills, but. So, like, a lot of people who use his stuff or use other stuff and try to shortcut their way through it, make very fundamental mistakes, and it always, like, I mean,
it's very jarring. Yeah,
when they use Jama's like clay textures, and the scale is completely wrong.
Yeah.
I'm like, they completely lack the understanding, or they apply it to anything, right? They apply it to stuff that obviously cannot be made out of clay, because clay would not be able to support
Make those
these
shapes.
So like,
Yeah.
and I'm like, I guess these people have never had clay in their hands, right? They don't know what it feels like, how big the fingerprints on it would really be. And I'm like, but I mean, that's what it is, right? And I know fundamentals.
It's like the first time you learn photo bashing, right? It's similar. Like you try to use
Yeah.
photos and everything to make it all look real, but then the scale's off.
But it's okay, right? I mean, some people will always try to find a shortcut, and that's okay, right? But I think it's the fundamental thing that fundamentals are. It's the fundamental thing that fundamentals are unsexy.
Well said.
Yeah, it's there's something about it that, like, okay, now you learn this for 3 years, and you just, before you touch any 3D program, and they go like, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to click the buttons here. And
yeah, I mean, it's definitely something I've suffered from early on in my career, even since 2016. Going to my first event and seeing people who use even 3D back then, but like I said, it was Modo or whatever they were using, ZBrush.
Yeah.
But now, like I think the thing I've missed when I was learning early on was that the foundation should have been my focus. And even recently I've came off like social media altogether almost, because I'm just, at this point, it is just, and I feel like it is, like, it's very valid, because I feel like as artists or even creatives, you put so much of yourself into your work that if you constantly spend your day just looking at like the worst parts of society, then when you try to sit down and work, like, goddamn, like you'll get to drag yourself to the computer. You're just like, oh, can it be? It's just so much to deal with, and then on top of that, you've got to work. So yeah, I feel like the time is now for me to really core into those fundamentals and forget about 3D, forget about the industry, forget about what job am I going to get? Because I mean, think that's the early on stuff, right? It's like you're like, oh, am I going to go work for this company or this company? But then I think if you just take the industry out of your head for a little bit and focus on what makes you progressively happy as a creative, then when you get a job, when you get those opportunities, then that stuff is more organic. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but it's difficult though. And I mean, like, how are you gonna, like, it feels like you have to do everything at the same time, right? Because I mean, how you can't just say like, oh, forget about this, because you need to still make a living, right?
Yeah, of course.
And
I mean, I'm in a very fortunate position where I'm in your shoes, where I've got a family support and I've been working for so long, but I'm at the very start of the race. You're, and at your point. So yeah,
it doesn't get any easier though. I can't tell you that much.
Yeah. But then you have a foundation under you at this point that if Blender disappeared tomorrow, you could still work to an extent. I mean, you're not going to be like me, where I'm like, I can't draw competently enough to make a design or do something well enough to that level. But then if, like I said, if Blender disappeared, if Megascans went away, you would still be able to do concept art.
Yeah, exactly. I've done it before, and I'm going to do it after. Right, something new is going to come around, and then exactly. That's the right way to approach all of this, right? Even though people might not want to hear it, but this is how it's going to be doing. But I mean, fair enough, right? I mean, if you say like, oh, like you tell me that I'm not supposed to use it, then why are you using it, kind of thing, right? I'm like, it's okay.
Yeah, but then I think you get to a point in your career where, like, especially when you work in production for film specifically, because you're early, when you done games initially, with Ubisoft, but then of course you were working in Lucasfilm. So with a lot of those industries now, even having this conversation with Raphael at one of the events is like, people don't understand that you'll learn to paint and draw your life, but then when you work in a studio, it's like, great, we need to have 50 concepts this week, and you're sitting there like, okay, so between a team of 5 people, we have to do 10 a day or something. So like, when you're sitting in that position, you'd love to paint and draw something by hand for 6-7 hours a day. And that's impossible, right? That's never going to happen. In between eating your lunch and trying to get a bit of time to go home and see your family, you want to push out those concepts. You can't physically do that by just rendering every single detail. A lot of these guys, like Raphael, like yourself, will probably do paintings and sketches on the weekends for yourself, because you're trying to reclaim part of that creative you've lost when you've entered the industry. You know what I mean? So when you start and do stuff in production, it's like, it's great, you're churning out all these concepts, but then it's using techniques that aren't fulfilling you in certain parts. So that's why you have special projects. So is that, I mean, do you even feel like when you step away from the industry, are you still doing things outside that are not production focused?
I mean, let's call them art focused. No, I don't really.
Okay.
I mean, it's.
That's not a bad thing. That's not. You don't have to be doing that. I know when you look at people on Instagram, you're like, I wish I was, but you don't have to.
Yeah, that's the thing, right? Like I'm looking at people like, and he's like, somebody writes like, oh, I did this over the weekend. That's like this amazing painting, and I'm like, oh, fuck you, go away. Like that. Like, I mean, it's my own brain that is kind of creating these illusions of I'm not good enough, right?
Of course. Every single artist has it.
It's difficult, right? Once you're a bit further along in your life, you really have to think like what your priorities are. So I mean, of course, like you have to kind of balance it between you want to spend time and support your family. You need to make a bit of money. You just need to, right? There's the work. It works with that, right? But of course, at the same time, you want to at least do something that creatively fulfills you, right? Because it is. If you only do client work, it's very, very draining. Initially, I started these tutorials to have it as an outlet for creativity and my own stuff, but of course, that doesn't work that way. That's something I tricked myself into to just work even more, of course.
But then I think there's a mentality of this industry as well, is that I think I found this really early on, is that when I looked at a lot of people who were doing talks and up on the stage and had all this incredible body work, and like, let's take Raphael Lacoste, for instance. Shout out Raphael, the guy's an amazing artist. But, he, outside of like making the Assassin's Creed games, has a sketchbook that would like make you melt. It's just so incredible. Every time Ian McHugh posts a sketch up, you're just like, your face is melting. But then for a lot of people in this industry, it can just be a job. Like, you can do so much work and then shut your brain off and go home.
A lot of people do,
you don't have to be, if you're one of those guys like Raphael who, is constantly working and doing all this incredible stuff and putting out books and stuff, that's great. That's, that suits what he has for his mission in his life. But then I think for a lot of students, because they see that, right? They see that as the norm. They see that as that's everybody in the industry.
Exactly.
But it's really no. Like, there is people who will go to a job and do the 9 to 5 or whenever they finish and come home and then think about the studio anymore. So I think within just balancing your life, you have to understand that if you don't want to be that person, if you don't want to be constantly making work and doing all these incredible projects, then like, you're not a bad artist. You're not a bad person. You're just, you're human, right? You're just normal. You're like everybody else. Is that something you felt like early on in your career as well? Is that what you felt maybe you were chasing when you were kind of trying to keep up with freelance work?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it have such conflicting thoughts about all of this, right? I mean, I'm always trying to tell myself like, I'm like, okay, it's good enough. It's like, you've done enough. You don't need to go crazy and do even more, right? It's
right.
Take a rest. It's going to be better. Read a book instead of just continuing to draw more, right? I mean, I've had ups and downs and severe times of like being a workaholic and just trying to shove as much work into my schedule as possible. Like, 2 full-time jobs already, I can easily take on a third one, no problem, right? And then you're suddenly like, shit, the week only has 7 days. I've been there. I've been severely out of work for some time. That leads you down a really dark path as well. To this day, I still don't know what's the best way to go about this. I mean, it to a certain degree, of course, it's very personal, right? I just found that this might sound weird, but I don't like concept art.
Okay. And that's the interview, everybody. Thanks for coming.
Right. Like, no, what I mean with that is, I mean, I like the creation process. I like games. I like movies and that kind of stuff. But like, I just cannot look at ArtStation. I just cannot look at it.
I think it's
not because ArtStation is ArtStation. Like, I just don't like to look at concept art in general. I don't have any art books. I don't play any games anymore. I watch them on YouTube. And like, art of books are to me like just like, nah, I don't need that. I'm not inspired by it. I find it's generic and boring, and
Right.
I mean, maybe that's what people say about my work as well, right? I mean, who knows, right? It's fine, right? You
Yeah.
don't. Not everybody has to like everything, and I think it's. I mean, I know plenty of people who don't like concept art and they work as concept
Right.
artists. But
Yeah.
of course, I'm not going to name any names, and these
Mhm.
people don't want to say that publicly. But I don't know. I don't care.
Yeah.
Why do I have to love concept art in order to produce concept art? That's
Well, this is what we talked about like 2 seconds ago, where I said, like, for a lot of people, it's just a job, right? Like when I was an engineer, I didn't love my job, but I'd done it because I needed money and it was a career.
yeah, and
You know what I mean?
you can still do it well, even so you don't like it, right?
Yeah, you're not incompetent in your job. You're not
Yeah, exactly.
producing stuff that's subpar. You're still being professional. You're still meeting deadlines. But then, of course, it's no your every living breath and being. Like like you said, you're not going home and looking at art books or sitting in an art station all day. And yeah, but then I think that's interesting because I think out of a lot of the guests we've had, you've got to be the first one that's ever said you don't like concept art. So I think it's interesting to have that perspective because there might be people that share that opinion, right? There might be people that sit there, they're like,
sure they are.
like, breathing a sigh of relief, like, oh, thank God somebody else said it. Like, I've been thinking about this. I thought there was something wrong with me,
but I think it's because my path into it was quite different. So I mean, a lot of people just like they go to like an art high school and then they go to like, I don't know, art center, and then they become a concept artist and then they become an art director, blah blah. So they have like a very even trajectory, and like, oh, like when I was like, I know all these stories of like people saying like, oh, I loved to draw when I was a kid. And that's kind of, it feels like a smooth path. They knew from the beginning what they were going to do, and they just executed on that. And I'm like, I never had that. I didn't give a shit about drawing. I didn't give a shit about anything else either. So I was a horrible student. I didn't have I wasn't I don't have a traditional art background or anything.
Right.
I was just interested in all sorts of things, and I just kind of went with the flow, right? I spent a couple of years in university learning on completely different things. I worked as a graphic designer here and there, and was in academia for a long time, and worked in a finance company and all sorts of stuff. And eventually, like, yeah, okay, I ended up doing this, and I don't think I'm going to do it forever.
Right.
It happens to be that I'm halfway decent, that I can make a living from it, right?
Right.
But it doesn't mean it's the be all end all. I'm actually, like, sometimes I wish I was that like focused on that particular task, and I could be a happy artist, working away every day, trying to improve my craft and be that like 85-year-old sushi master. Making that perfect egg maki or whatever, but like that's just not for me. That's just not for me. I need to be constantly doing something new, and usually when I get too comfortable in one thing, I'm forcing myself to look for something different. So I mean, like you were mentioning before that like, what do I do outside of work creatively or not, right? I mean, a lot of time is just being sucked up by not sucked up, but like I'm spending a lot of time with my kids, so they take up the entire weekend, because I stopped working on the weekend when I had kids, because otherwise it goes crazy. Of course. It kind of, you have that urge to get back to things you want to develop and to not lose that train of thought. But I consciously put a stop to that, because I think it's just detrimental for the entire family if you have a workaholic dad. That's really not nice. But I have my own plans. I have my own things that I want to do, and they again, they don't have anything to do with concept design. At this point, I don't even know if this is something that can turn into another career or another job or something. I have no idea. It's just,
I mean, maybe it's just a thing we need to take maybe a step back from the industry for a while. Maybe it's something where, I mean, it's hard, I know, because you have a family and commitments, exactly. you need money, but maybe on the side you can start to look and see maybe there's something else that might interest me, or something that,
exactly right.
Yeah, so because like you said, you've worked in. I mean, I know people who are architects and design these incredible buildings, but for them, like when they put their pencil down and walk out the building, like they don't give a second thought to what they've done that day. But they're still doing something very creative and important for the world. So
Exactly.
yeah, I don't think it has to be your every waking thought. And I think that's a good, I think it's really interesting that you've brought this conversation piece up, because I think there is a lot of people who I've met early on who were like, oh, I didn't draw, like, again, I'm using Raphael's name and all, but just people who, who they look up to, like, oh, they guys, they draw 10 hours, 12 hours a day. I only get, an hour in if I'm lucky. And I'm like, well, that's fine as long as you're still being consistent. And I think it's trying to paint a picture of, like, you are allowed to be a human being. You're allowed to disconnect yourself from this industry if you want to. You can still work in it. Like, I know plenty of 3D artists who work down the road, in different studios, but like, they go and they build 3D things all day, they come home and switch off. So it's not a crime. It doesn't make you a bad person because you want to have a life outside your work. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly right. I mean, but it's I mean, it's a tricky thing to navigate, right? Because as a student and as a young person, you don't like. I think the realizing that every artist that even like every quote unquote famous artist has gotten to where they are in a different way, right?
Yeah.
That is completely useless to a young person, because they're like, so what do I do
What's
now?
the secret formula?
It would be easier for them to say like, oh, you do this, and this, and then you're going to be fantastic, right? But they're like, you can do this or you can do this. Like, you can have a sketchbook or not. You can learn 3D or not. And like, so that doesn't help me. Sorry.
Yeah, I think that's interesting with my podcast as well. And I think the one thing I talk about when people ask, what brings people to the podcast is, and I think it's that whenever you pose to somebody, how did you get into this industry? Every single person has a different answer. I think that's why this industry is unique, because like when I was an engineer, I was an apprentice, so I didn't even go to school traditionally. I just left high school and got picked, and then they train me on the job. So
exactly,
with this industry, that's why I feel there's almost a disconnect sometimes for me, because when I was hired as an engineer, I didn't know how to be an engineer. I was just a body that would become an engineer. But with concept art, like if you can't draw or paint when you sit down in an interview, like you wouldn't even get the interview, right? Because you need to have already proved that skill set before you even get anywhere near the front door. So it's a weird place where I think people feel that disconnect when you leave university or school, and then you're still like, oh great, I still have to train for 3 years on my own, or a year on my own to build that skill gap that I thought university was going to give me, but it didn't.
Yeah. But I guess what everybody kind of has in common, though, like if you have to put like one skill down to what makes, I mean, it's actually a skill that is not even unique to being an artist or anything. I think it's just something that combines, that holds everything that makes anybody in any industry great, is right, the amount of effort and dedication and the passion you bring to the job, right? That you need to have that, because it's, I mean, what I really don't want to do is like saying that this career or this job or anything is something special or out of the ordinary. I mean, if you're really passionate about it, if you put the effort in, yes, you can make it, right? And that's true, right? If you want to be a good lawyer, you have to put in effort and dedication, right? If you want to be a good doctor, you have to put that in. I think though, maybe where the gap is a little bit is that there is not much room for somebody who's mediocre. I think you can have like a shitty doctor, and he can still kind of like, as long as he doesn't kill you, it's going to be fine. But like a bad artist is not going to get a job. You have
bad. Oh no, on you go. Sorry.
Sorry. Yeah, I think you have to hit a certain threshold in order to get jobs, and there's just no room for somebody who can kind of half-ass it. They're going to have really, really low-paying jobs or no jobs at all. That's, I think, what makes it a bit difficult to power through that period of mediocrity and to really emerge on the other side. And honestly, that just, I mean, looking back at what I did, it just takes, I think, to a certain degree, pure stubbornness and
just not giving up.
A lot of luck to get out of it and get hired.
Yeah.
I think. I mean, I can't even put it to anything else. I can't say like, oh, I worked really hard and blah blah blah, and then I got a job because of that. This is straight up lying. You need to have a good. I mean, you need to be prepared anyway. But then so much of it depends on timing and luck, to be honest.
Yeah, well, I think even somebody they broke it down ages ago, saying that luck was preparedness meets opportunity. So I think for you, like, it probably talks about but then you've worked on like some of the biggest franchises in the world, and you've worked on these major games, and I mean, I know you're saying like, you know, for you it's a career, but then I think it's you know, I took a look back years ago when I was working part-time as a salesman after I left my engineer job, because I needed some kind of job to sustain me through university. So, but then I was because I can talk the back legs off a donkey, like, you know, people were, you know, I was so good at selling things to people that the guy in that, he was like, oh, I want you to train people, I want you to go for management positions. And I was like, but then there was people I knew that had been working there for years and couldn't sell you a telephone. So, I mean, like, they were looking at me in a weird way. But, you know, for some people, I think it is, like you said, with artists, you know, you could work mediocrely, but then your jobs will all be mediocre. So, like, if you want to work on Star Wars, for instance, or you want to work at Lucasfilm, then, you need to be the top salesman, right? You need to be the guy that's pushing out the amazing stuff. And so I think there is room for people who want to maybe be an artist, but no within the bounds of like working in AAA. But then if you're not aiming for that kind of at least goalpost, then it sometimes can be difficult to wade through the industry, you know, at the lower levels. But that's just my take on it. I don't know if that applies to art as well as sales, but yeah, I think it's interesting to look at it like that.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, so I mean, looking forward now, I mean, you've done, I'm trying to think, because you left Lucasfilm, that was a while back now, right? That was, I don't know specifically, but was that a couple of years back?
2012, I think.
Right, okay. So an instance, you know, you've been freelance for nearly a decade or something going on that, but is that something you might be looking on? Is it maybe the fact that, I'm trying to think of this. I'm not trying to therapeutically solve you here, Jan, but
please.
Is it? I know this is what's turned into. I make this. I've been told by everybody in my life that I make them feel at ease sometimes, but so this must be what it is. I put you at ease. You're letting it all out, dude. You're spilling it all out on the podcast. But is it maybe something that you want to go back and work in a studio setting, because then the pressure then is off of the consistency of work? Because I have met people who get burnt out in studios, so go freelance, but then also get burnt out in freelance, so go back in the studios. So is that something you're thinking about, or?
I mean, it's like a up and down. Like there's times I really hate freelance, there's times I love it, right? It's really, the one thing I would say that I'm not looking for anything in particular. I'm really enjoying, I think I'm unconsciously enjoying the benefits of freelance, of being at home and being able to bring my kids to school and pick them up, have lunch with them, play with them whenever I want, go out for a run at 3 p.m. and all these kind of things I could not do. Like I don't miss like commuting like at all, right? But what I would always say is that I would never say no to an opportunity. So I had plenty of requests and interviews with studio jobs and everything, and I don't know, it felt like it never made sense with that particular company or with that particular job. I think it kind of contributes also that I'm living in Singapore and there's really not much of an industry.
I was going to say, we would differ across the area.
So there's no temptation, to be honest, of like, oh, I want to really work for them. I think also one of the things that kind of keeps me from doing that is that I don't have that intense desire to work on like some big franchise or whatever, right?
Right.
So maybe now all the people strike me off their lists. I don't know. I don't care.
Yeah, no, but I was going to say, I mean, maybe it's even a thing where, you know, I think the thing I've found, especially because people sometimes get put off by studios as maybe their first job. Maybe they work somewhere horrible, right? And that's their only experience of the industry is that horrible studio. But I think finding a studio that fits your dimensions is one of the hardest things to find. But when you do, it almost is like the light switch, you know what I mean? I think, again, people I know who have worked at Axis and here in Glasgow, you know,
Mm.
the studio is kind of 10 in the morning until 6 at night. And that specifically is that they don't work past 6 usually, you know, they don't work weekends. So that's more because they know a lot of the people who work there have families. So they want them to be able to drop their kids off in the morning and be able to go home at night and no worry about having to come back into the office. So in essence, I think that's why so many people go back, because they love that culture. You know, it's a very culture. So,
I mean, in the end, what you want is nice people to work with, right? I mean, that's also what puts the certain freelance jobs apart from others, right? That you have a team of people, or you have a really, really nice art director, whatever, that you work with. And I mean, I had jobs on both spectrums, right? I had completely awful experiences, and I also had the opposite of fantastic experiences, and those people become your close friends, right? And you might not actually work together again, but you become like friends for many years, right? And that's also a nice thing, right? And in the end, if you found a company and you love the team, you love the people, and it makes you happier than anything to work with these people, then that's really great, right? I mean, I have never had that. Maybe in the future there will be something, but I don't know. I'm not actively looking for it. If something happens, then it happens. If not, I'm not waiting for anything to happen. I'm always going to be doing my own thing, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's definitely there's merit in having your own statutory part of the world that you call home. And I think, especially with Singapore, you know, there's guys I know in Malaysia, you know, like Gerald Sang, like a lot of those guys who are doing stuff, and it's their own, you know, their own thing. They work for people freelance. They have their own place in the world, and
you know him.
Yeah, we interviewed him. He was about 5 episodes previously, but he was on, and then straight after we interviewed him, we done the whole Batman design thing, and blew up again online. But yeah, but you know Gerald, like he has his own corner of the world where he works from, and he's got a team with him. But you know, he essentially just does his own thing and doesn't really have to be connected to the other parts of the world. He's happy with what he's doing, and you know, like you said, if you're content with your work, if you're happy with the people you're working with, then you didn't really have to go out and be like, oh, I need to go work at Blizzard by next year, or I need to be working in, you know, LA on this massive franchise by the time I'm this age, or I'm a failure. You know, like if you feel like you're doing enough, then that's enough.
It's a hard decision to make, though. It's not something that you just easily decide on, okay, this is what I'm going to do, right? Because if you want to focus on your stuff, you can't do the other stuff. If you focus on getting into a studio in LA, then you can't do something else. So if you pursue something, you need to be very conscious about all the other things that you can't pursue.
I'm missing out on
that. So, and I mean, artists, like, when I look at shit, I'm always like, oh, I wish I would have worked on that. I wish I would have done that. Oh, I really want to do this. Oh, I really want to do that. But then I'm like, wait. I'm doing something that should be far more important to me. So I have to say no to all this other stuff. And it's a very hard decision. It's a very hard decision because you constantly especially if you're by yourself, if you want to do things by yourself, if you want to do your own projects, big or small, you will have to deal with just intense amount of self-doubt on a daily basis, and it's really, really harsh, right? If you like basically like I don't know, if you work in a 300 or 500 like people company, and you do your job day in, day out, then I think you can you don't even have you're not really responsible for, like, how do I say, like, of course you are part of the machine, you help build that game, but your individual effort is, I mean, honestly, like, it's exchangeable, it's negligible, right? They can get somebody else to do your job, right? But if you do your own stuff that only you can do, that you are solely responsible for that kind of stuff, and you can't be replaced because nobody else is going to do it the way that you do. When you put your name on it and your branding and you push it out to the world, right? And man, it's like constant roller coaster. I'm like, what am I doing? It's just like nobody will buy this. This is shit. People read this, and seriously, on a daily basis, there's not a single.
Such a cheery conversation I've had with you, Jan. This has been great, honestly.
I mean, it's harsh, right? And it doesn't get any easier, right? Not even
I know what you mean, man. Yeah.
After even after doing it, even after doing it for years, you're still like, every time you're like, well, what am I like? Why? Like, this makes no sense whatsoever. Like, why am I wasting my time? And then I don't know. You need to find a strategy of how you can shut that voice up, because that voice is just going to keep you from doing something, right? And I mean, for me, it's like, I know a lot of friends who sit on an amazing amount of work, and they never release it because they want it to be perfect and completely 100% aligned with their vision, and they just end up hoarding it on their hard drive and never doing anything with it. And I mean, I can understand that, and to a certain degree, I envy that pride they have in their work. That they want it to be as good as it can be, whereas I'm just like, just upload it. It's like, fuck it. It's like 12. It's midnight. I want to go to bed. I just upload it and like be done with it, even though I know it's not as good as it can be. But I'm like, it is what it is. Like, I think it comes from like the whole production mindset that it's like, okay, like you have to hand it in at the end of the day, and then it is what it is, and just move on. Do something better tomorrow. And that's kind of my approach. I mean, it's maybe it's not the right approach. I don't know. Like, I don't know if there's a right approach, right? I mean,
but it's the right approach for you, I think, is what is important.
Yeah,
for you as an individual.
And it can't even be a recommendation that I say like, oh, everybody has to operate that way, right? You don't have to. Like, some people just like, I mean, I almost post shit daily on social media. I mean, I don't know. Do I have to? Do I not? Like, I don't know. I just do it. And then there's other people who upload like one image like every 2 months, and like, and they're like, okay, cool. Like, they're like doing that, right? I mean, like, I don't know which one is the better strategy. Is there a strategy? What does it matter? It doesn't matter at all. It's like, I think
the key for a lot of the things I've found, especially over my little time on this block in this industry, I think, and even, you know, I've not had a proper full-time job yet, so I can't really speak. But for what I've learned for the last couple of years is that when I talked about earlier about shutting my head out of the industry, I think sometimes that's what you need to do. And you talked about not even going to an art station. I think that's almost a great thing you can do, because the more you look at other people's work and compare yourself to other people, then the less you will focus on your individual needs. And you think that I need to be posting like this person or putting this tutorials out like this person. You just do whatever you feel is best for you, you know. And I feel like a lot of the guys sometimes I speak to who are in the production mindset you are, where you're using like almost 100% 3D, is that you lose a bit of your creativity, I think, because, you know, like take TB Choi, for instance, right, as a name that we've used a couple times in the podcast, but, you know, she has a merit in her own as an artist and is almost an invaluable asset because, you know, like almost nobody can draw like her, you know, or close to what she's doing. So there's merit in her work. She's an individual. She, you know, you couldn't really buy and sell her easily because, you know, she has such a unique voice. But then with people who use 3D in production and do stuff for like Star Wars and Marvel stuff, you know, a lot of this concepts will look similar, will look kind of the same because you use similar production methods. So I think sometimes you feel like you lose the individualism in that process because you're it's a group mentality when it comes to
maybe.
Yeah. So maybe you just need to draw, Jan. That's maybe what it is.
I don't have any nostalgia towards drawing, to be honest. So,
or painting, or sculpting. It might, you know, it might even just be picking up a pound of clay and doing something with it. Sometimes it's like it's not got to be that thing, but then there maybe is something that you're missing out of your routine, something that you can take away and do just for yourself. You don't have to post it. You don't have to be, you know, putting it on Instagram, you know, literally sculpt something for yourself, and you don't have to show any of the, or do whatever. But then, like, I think maybe that is something that might make you feel more injected into your work if you're having something that is just for you outside of that. So
my tool of choice is the camera. That's what I do.
Oh, photography, yeah, that's exactly, that's an art in itself. So yeah, like if you're out taking reference photos or you're out taking, you know, whatever, then sure. I mean, I do it occasionally. I took some pictures of castles here in Scotland, but I mean, if you do stuff like that and it's just for you, then yeah, like if that's maybe something that you could also build, maybe not a career on, but build a following on, or build your own little separate account. Don't even call it your name and make it something just for you privately, or call it whatever, but you know, don't have it linked directly to you, but you know, have it like an outlet that is something that's not production. Just my 2 cents, but yeah, I don't know.
Who knows? I mean, that's the theory of it, right?
yeah. Something that's just for you and it's not for everybody. So yeah. So in essence, I mean, I think we've kind of came to the end of this particular episode, but I mean, I definitely think we could dive into more on different subjects that you've been involved in. Sure. But yeah, I think there's a lot to unpack there. I definitely feel like this has been one of the more unique voices we've had in the podcast in terms of just but then it's good, right? Because then I think when everybody's the same, when all you constantly hear is like these, like, you know, you'd say the quote unquote superstars, the heroes of the industry, then it gets to a point where kids will try to relate to that and think that's the norm, right? That's what everybody's like in the industry. But then you want to have people that are also, you know, maybe not particularly happy what they're doing, or maybe think differently, or don't really want to use work outside of their personal life. So everybody's a mixed bag, right? So I think it's good to get all voices on and hear everybody's opinion. Yeah. So yeah. So again, you guys, thanks for listening. Thanks for tuning in and listening to myself and Jan speak. I'll leave all Jan's details below, on social media, and some routes into his tutorial stuff. If you have any questions or any comments, make sure you leave them down below. Jan will try and get back to you. He also has a YouTube channel where he posts tutorials and videos from his production side of work. His ArtStation and that will also be there. Thanks again to Jan for giving up his time and coming on.
You're welcome. It was a pleasure.
Yeah, it was an awesome talk, Jan. I really enjoyed it. So yeah, thanks again, guys, for tuning in. And again, check us out on YouTube. Most podcast services, we're everywhere at this point. And if you have any suggestions for future guests or things you want to hear, just post them up and I'll hear them. We also have a Discord just now if people want to come on. We've got an active community of about 100 people who post work and give feedback. So if you want to join us as well on that, that's there down below as well. And yeah, that's really it. Thanks again, Jan. Thanks again to you guys for listening. And we'll see you guys later. Bye.